I had the privilege the other day of having lunch with a merchant, not one of our customers, who is working to move to a different platform. One of the chief complaints or concerns with their existing platform, Adobe Commerce or Magento 2, is just how freaking expensive it is to run. As an agency that helps merchants succeed on a variety of different platforms, Adobe Commerce, BigCommerce, and Shopify, we are seeing the very same things. We are seeing that Adobe Commerce just in general is expensive to maintain and operate, and are noticing a very significant savings when moving over into software as a service platforms. Again, there are some cons associated with this. And the big thing, just to quickly reiterate, Adobe Commerce brings this open source of flexibility and power with it. There is nothing that is off limits with Adobe Commerce. Nothing. You can create anything. That said, there is an exception that is slowly developing, and that is with our catalog service, Adobe I/O, App Builder. Some of these, well, App Builder is open source, but basically some of these external tools that allow you to customize how the application runs. So it's kind of like running customizations in their own environment, which has a lot of pros associated with it, which is super cool. There are a few cons. Again, you're kind of giving up some customization or flexibility. That's the value though of Adobe Commerce, is you can literally customize anything and everything that you would ever want to customize. I'm Joseph Maxwell, president here at SwiftOtter, and I am super excited to be able to talk about and educate you as far as what does it go to into operating an Adobe Commerce website, and why is it just so expensive. Now, there are a couple of things that we need to call out as far as that go into this operating cost every year. We have these maintenance inputs. So we have the licensing if you're on an enterprise or B2B. We have the hosting if you are not on Adobe Commerce Cloud. We have the triannual upgrades. We have quarterly patches, and we have bug fixes. Now, this does not include some of the other costs associated with custom code or modules. Third-party modules that have been installed, that can create some significant challenges in these triannual upgrades. Typically, quarterly patches we see are pretty simple and straightforward. So you have these, 5 line items here, and these can really add up. The first thing to call out, though, is to make sure that you are not installing every upgrade as soon as it comes out. We would recommend that against it unless there is a specific need, specific new piece of functionality. To be honest, there's very little new functionality coming out in the core package. Now, Adobe is adding on to some of these other tools like live search and recommended products and etc. But at the end of the day, there isn't really much that's coming out in these upgrades. So we recommend pushing it to as minimal as possible. These upgrades are painful. They take a lot of time, and it's highly dependent on 2 things: the number of modules that are being installed or already installed as far as third-party modules, as well as custom modules. Ironically, we generally find custom modules a little bit easier to upgrade. It's the third-party modules which are the most difficult to upgrade. You say, why is that, Joseph? We're purchasing from well-known vendors here and there. Well, here's the thing. These well-known vendors, and I get their intentions, like to add additional functionality, probably because they're all competing against each other, into their code. Well, they also don't hold themselves to, I'm speaking in generalities here. There are some exceptions, but they generally don't hold themselves to proper versioning requirements, for lack of a better term. And any updates that you have custom made on top of these third-party modules end up breaking. Well, you might not find those until 3 months down the road. Thus, it just jacks up the cost. So the way we look at this is they're related to the cost of keeping a website going on Adobe Commerce. You pretty much have 2 levers. Lever 1 is the complexity of your business logic. Number 2 is the technical debt. Technical debt is the quality in which these complexities or these modules or these customizations have been implemented. If it's done at a very poor level, the technical debt will be high. If it is done very well, the technical debt should be in line with the complexity of the business logic, or hopefully less. And we're going to talk about some of these variables, these drivers that will affect how much technical debt you have in the application. But unfortunately, what we see as the primary driver of cost for running a Magento website is something that looks like this. The system is a house of cards. And no, from the day it was created up until today, it's just added onto, it's band-aided, it's customized, it's tweaked, and there's no overall architecture that is actually governing how this custom software project behaves. And I say that for a very specific reason. Adobe Commerce is a custom software project. Yes, the core is solid and it's well built, etc. But everything outside of the core and everything is how it interacts with the core is a custom software project. It ends up looking like this, if I could put it in Lego terms. It will break at the drop of a hat. This is technical debt. This is customizations that have been implemented poorly. Now, what I'm talking about, though, is having a good agency like SwiftOtter involved means that there is an architectural blueprint. There's an architect as well who is overseeing this project, who gets the big picture, understands how all these pieces fit together. It's not necessarily an overnight thing, as you can imagine, and then says, okay, but we need our website and our business logic to look something a little bit more like this. And looking like this is going to be much more stable. We can build on top of that. We can work through this. Now, again, even converting it from something that looks like this into something that looks like this is not an overnight project. This takes time, and unfortunately, it's just not in the budget to be able to do something like this. So it has to be an ongoing, over time conversation as there's availability, etc. But at the end of the day, we want a website that looks like this. And this website that you see right here, representative, will cost less to run by a very significant, maybe even exponential factor than a website that looks like this. This is a primary driver of the cost of running and operating your Adobe Commerce website. Technical debt. So inside of this, a couple things to note. First, like I said earlier, you should only be upgrading once every 3 years, or keeping it within the end of software support. So we see Adobe Commerce 244 expires next year as far as its support. Now, might say the end of this year. Probably should start planning towards an upgrade to 247 at that point. I don't think 248 will be out by then. So 247, get an upgrade on the books. Now, the other thing is you can also watch right here. You can also watch for this to come out. So we have our security drop. And I think actually, if I remember correctly, it will be launched early next year, 248. So you can get 248, your hands on that, get that project going, and ultimately then be able to extend it out even further past April of 2027. These are the heavy lift upgrades. Do them only once every 3 years unless there's some compelling reason to do it more often than that. But it's very important to be applying your security patches just as quickly as possible after they're released. So how then, outside of these ongoing upgrades, how do you seek to lower the cost of your development? Now, a couple of things that are important here. First, you want certified developers. Now, why in the world is this important? Certified developers understand the Adobe Commerce application at a much more thorough level, and they're going to be helpful in getting you the right solution as quickly as possible. These people are incredibly knowledgeable about Adobe Commerce. Now, I would recommend expert level, if at all possible, or master level. Now, in this conversation, we've actually helped over almost 10,000 people get certified. So we are blessed to be able to have some of the finest people working on our team. So it doesn't just stop at certified developers. I've known plenty of certified developers that don't follow along with some of these other best practices that I'm going to talk about. Check this one out. Testing automation. I'll tell you what, I am so proud of our team. We have worked to champion this internally. When we make changes, get those into an automated testing environment. So in the future, these changes, we know whether they stick. See, with Adobe Commerce, because it is a custom software application, we often hear of this game of whack-a-mole. We fix one thing and it breaks over here, and then we fix that and it breaks this original thing, and we call it whack-a-mage. It's incredibly frustrating for merchants. The costs go through the roof, and yeah, it's expensive. If you invest a little bit in this automated testing, that is going to save significant amounts of time, especially when you have these massive upgrade projects that take a lot of resources and a lot of testing involved there. Finally, though, there's one other thing that I think is important to understand here, and that is having an architect who truly understands your project. At SwiftOtter, we work to have a really talented team of architects who oversee these projects and makes these decisions about, is this a good decision, or is this the right way to do it, or maybe we should do it another way, or implement it differently, or push back on this requirement in general because it's going to create a huge performance load, and we're having trouble figuring out a way to figure out how to implement this well. The other thing I mentioned here is the blueprint. So every ticket should have a blueprint associated with it from an architect, kind of high-level bullet points saying, this is how I think you should do it. Again, coming from this perspective, having the overall knowledge of this project, saying, okay, we have this, I think it should be implemented over here and like this. Of course, if the developer gets in, doesn't think it's the right way to do it, well, of course, that becomes a dialogue between the architect and the developer. In our experience, developers can see very precise, they see very fine details in the application, but the architect's goal is to see the forest through the trees, and that's where that blueprint comes in. So these are 3 ways that you can ensure you have the best team working on your Adobe Commerce website. We want to see you successful, and that's why we're putting out this information. So episode number 3 of eCom Buzz. This is why Adobe Commerce is a little bit pricey to run in general, and that's unfortunately because technical debt abounds. I gave you some ways to how to help move past that as quickly as possible. Take care, and we'll see you next week.